are you? But nothing would turn up. Then one day, a Federal Heights milkman called the police. He had a tip. Okay, so he claimed to have seen an older gray car driving slowly through the neighborhood before the abduction. He said the car looked suspicious, so he quickly reached for a notepad and wrote down the license plate number. The police obviously got excited. They finally had something to work with. And so they quickly entered the number into their system and prepared to locate the perp. And guys, there was only one problem. This license plate number didn't exist. It was a dead end. Meanwhile, the stress of the search began to take a toll on the family. Ed Smart was out on his feet all day looking for his daughter, only coming home for short breaks and naps. Eventually, after a few days of getting absolutely no rest, he finally fainted from exhaustion. And so, ladies and boxheads, he was rushed to the hospital. But he refused to stay put. The doctors had a hard time keeping him in bed for more than a few hours, after which he was finally back on his feet, running out to look for Elizabeth. While the Smarts continued their efforts holding candlelight vigils, praying for their daughter's safe return, the police turned their attention to potential suspects. Suspect 1. Brett Michael Edmond. Witnesses reported seeing Brett in Federal Heights around the time of the abduction. The detectives set out to locate him, but the man was nowhere to be found. After several false sightings and tracking him across multiple states, the police finally found him in West Virginia. But it wasn't all good news. They found him hospitalized for an overdose and liver failure. Brett laid in critical condition. But luckily for everyone, he was alert enough to answer questions. The police conducted a thorough interview, but they had to clear him of any involvement because nothing suspicious came up. Suspect 2. With absolutely no new leads, the investigation turned to Richard Albert Ricci, a former handyman who had worked at the Smart home. Ricci had a grocery list of past offenses, including burglary, robbery, and even attempted murder. Ed Smart had hired Ricci the previous year, unaware of his past. Ricci had worked on the family's property in exchange for an old Jeep. When police questioned Ricci, he denied any involvement in Elizabeth's abduction. He also fully cooperated with the investigation. He didn't put up any fight. Like you would expect, Richard Ricci was under intense scrutiny. The police had conducted an exhaustive search of his home. They ransacked his house and even dug up his yard. He gave blood samples and he even sat through 26 hours of interviews. He even surrendered his own vehicle to the authorities. Despite their best efforts, nothing related to Elizabeth was found. And yet the authorities felt like there was something off with this guy. But then after, Richard Ricci was forced with theft and burglary. The charges came from incidents in the Federal Heights neighborhood, including one involving the Smart family's home. Ed Smart confronted Ricci about the alleged theft of the jewelry and a perfume bottle, hoping he was talking to the perpetrator. Somehow Ricci denied his involvement and the cops couldn't find anything on him, so they had to let him go. Then in August 2002, Ricci's story took a tragic turn. While in custody, Ricci suffered a brain aneurysm. He was rushed to the hospital where doctors performed an emergency surgery to remove a blood clot and reduce pressure on his brainstem. But ladies and boxheads, it was way too late. Ricci's condition kept getting worse. He lost his ability to speak, then he lost his ability to breathe on his own. After several days spent in pain, his family made the decision to remove him from life support. Ricci's death was a huge blow to the investigation. I mean, he was the prime suspect, and with him gone, the case was back to square one. As if these dead ends weren't frustrating enough, out came the opportunists looking to make some fast cash from the ongoing investigation. In November 2002, a dumbass from South Carolina named Walter Kenneth Holloway contacted the Smarts and the police claiming that he'd kidnapped Elizabeth. And the dumbass demanded $3 million for her safe return and threatened to hurt her if the money wasn't delivered. The police traced Holloway's location and immediately arrested him. The man clearly had no idea what he was doing. I mean, is he crazy? It didn't take long to figure out that Holloway was lying. I mean, he had no connection to Elizabeth whatsoever. And at this point, the investigation had begun to grow cold. Desperate for answers, detectives began turning to unconventional methods. No, seriously, it was time to trust the psychics. One psychic claimed Elizabeth's body was buried in a crypt in the foothills above Salt Lake City. Police followed the tips, searching the crypt and the surrounding areas. The only thing they could find was frustration, obviously. Other psychics insisted that she'd been killed within hours of her abduction and there was no way of finding her now. Like you would expect, this was going nowhere. The Smart family's hope was fading when a report came in, a potential breakthrough. A witness in Nebraska claimed to have seen a crying girl at a gas station. The description he gave fit Elizabeth almost perfectly. A girl between 12 and 14 years old sitting in a minivan and seemingly being held against her will. But after a thorough investigation, police found out that the sighting was unrelated. Once again, a lead that had turned into nothing. Then there was news of a crime in Salt Lake City. An 11-year-old girl was abducted from her bedroom, beaten and sexually, When doctors examined her, they discovered that every single bone in the middle of her face had been broken. Police arrested a suspect, Javier Sickler, a close friend of the victim's father. Javier claimed to have blacked out during the attack. But the question still lies, could this man have also taken Elizabeth? The police got to work, but just days later, they'd concluded that Javier had no connection to her abduction. Guys, it had been 4 months since Elizabeth had disappeared. The parents began to question if she was even going to come back anymore. The house had basically turned into a wake. But then, this is where something amazing happened. There was finally a real breakthrough, and I'm so excited to end this story off with something positive. And it came from the most unexpected source, Elizabeth's little sister, Mary Catherine. In October 2002, as Mary Catherine was going around doing her daily chores, it finally struck her. Remember how she had a feeling that she knew the kidnapper's voice? Well, in that exact moment, she realized who it was. It was Emmanuel. Emmanuel was an unemployed man her dad had hired to help with the roof repairs and with raking leaves. He had worked for the family for just one single day. She had her parents call the police immediately, but like you would expect, I think there was a little bit of hesitation. This was a child's claim after all. I mean, Emmanuel had only worked at the house for a short period of time. Could Mary Catherine's memory be accurate after so many months? Maybe she was imagining things because she really wanted her sister back. But there were no other solid leads coming in, so the police decided, why not? Let's give this a shot. A sketch artist created a drawing based on Mary Catherine's description of Emmanuel. The sketch was released to the public in February 2003. Emmanuel instantly became a wanted man. Within days, someone recognized the man in the drawing. His real name was not Emmanuel. It was Brian David Mitchell. And that's the man the police were now looking for. On March 12, 2003, two couples in Sandy, Utah spotted Mitchell walking with a woman and a young girl. The girl was wearing a headscarf and sunglasses, but the couples felt certain it was Elizabeth. They called the police. Officers arrived quickly, but they questioned the trio. The little girl even gave a false name, Esther. But something felt unnatural in the way that she was behaving, and so they continued to ask her questions. The police had a suspicion she was lying. Clearly, she was scared of Mitchell and the woman with him. As the questions continued, the officers promised her that she was in safe hands. And finally, she admitted the truth. They had found Elizabeth Smart after 9 months in captivity. Elizabeth, the brave little girl, was finally ready to tell her story of the 9 months spent in captivity. From, well, the very beginning. The night she was abducted, Mitchell had led her to a hidden camp in the mountains outside Salt Lake City. There, she met his wife, Wanda Barzy. At first, Barzy acted like a mom. She offered emotional support and warmth. But as the days turned into weeks, she became less kind. Mitchell and Barzy were followers of some strange kind of religion, and they threatened to hit Elizabeth if she didn't follow their religious rituals. Mitchell declared himself a Davidic king, claiming he was commanded by God to abduct virgin brides. He said that Elizabeth was going to be the first of his many partners in his fight against the Antichrist, and so she was forced to marry Mitchell in a sham ceremony. That's when the worst of it began. Mitchell stripped her of any sense of identity by telling her that her name was now Esther. He then went on to repeatedly assault her, saying that it was all a part of his divine mission. Elizabeth was tied to a tree with a metal cable. Every day from then onwards, she was forced to drink alcohol, take drugs, and read explicit magazines. She was also starved and fed scraps. And Mitchell would visit her multiple times a day to hurt her. She thought she was gonna die. On the day she was rescued, her nightmare had finally ended. After their arrest, Barzee pleaded guilty to her role in the abduction and was sentenced to 15 years in prison. In 2018, she was released early, despite protests from Elizabeth herself, who claimed that she was one of the most evil women she had ever met. Mitchell was sentenced to life in prison. During his sentencing, Elizabeth faced him one last time. She said, "You took away 9 months of my life, but you will never take away my future." Okay, ladies and boxheads, I'm going to include some links to Elizabeth herself recounting the story. Seriously, she is one brave woman. And I wish I could say that this video didn't get any worse, but now let me tell you about the next story. The Chowchilla Kidnapping. This is the story of how a school bus driver and 27 school children were buried alive in a failed kidnapping attempt. Yeah, it was July 15th, 1976. Ed Ray, a 55-year-old school bus driver in Chowchilla, California, started his usual afternoon route. 19 girls and 7 boys aged 5 to 14 years old. I mean, they were all excited, they were chatting, they were shouting. It was the second to last day of summer school. Ed Ray has been driving kids around Chowchilla for over 20 years. They loved him and he loved them back. Many of their parents and grandparents had even been his classmates growing up. But on this day, Ed's life and theirs would change forever. Ed was driving down a quiet, rural road under the burning hot California sun. Up ahead, something caught his eye. A white van stopped dead in the middle of the road. Ed frowned. He slowed the bus, looking for the van's driver. Was it broken down? Ed brought the bus to a stop, unaware that there was another van hidden nearby. Then the doors of the first van swung open. 3 men jumped out. Their faces were obscured by pantyhose, stretched tight like grotesque masks. Before Ed could react, one man stormed onto the bus and pressed the cold barrel of a gun to Ed's temple. "Move," the man ordered, his voice cold and calm. Ed's heart was racing, but he decided to obey. Ed stepped away from the driver's seat, and one of the masked men took over. The 2 other gunmen turned to the children. The bus went silent except for the muffled crying of a few terrified kids. The man at the wheel steered the bus off the road into a dry canal. The once familiar landscape disappeared behind them. Inside the bus, things were getting tense. Some of the younger kids didn't fully understand what was happening. 5-year-old Monica Artery stared curiously at one of the men. The legs of the pantyhose on his head hung down like floppy rabbit ears. Are you about the next story? The Chowchilla Kidnapping. This is the story of how a school bus driver and 27 school children were buried alive in a failed kidnapping attempt. Yeah, it was July 15th, 1976. Ed Ray, a 55-year-old school bus driver in Chowchilla, California, started his usual afternoon route. 19 girls and 7 boys aged 5 to 14 years old. I mean, they were all excited, they were chatting, they were shouting. It was the second to last day of summer school. Ed Ray has been driving kids around Chowchilla for over 20 years. They loved him and he loved them back. Many of their parents and grandparents had even been his classmates growing up. But on this day, Ed's life and theirs would change forever. Ed was driving down a quiet, rural road under the burning hot California sun. Up ahead, something caught his eye. A white van stopped dead in the middle of the road. Ed frowned. He slowed the bus, looking for the van's driver. Was it broken down? Ed brought the bus to a stop, unaware that there was another van hidden nearby. Then the doors of the first van swung open. 3 men jumped out. Their faces were obscured by pantyhose, stretched tight like grotesque masks. Before Ed could react, one man stormed onto the bus and pressed the cold barrel of a gun to Ed's temple. "Move," the man ordered, his voice cold and calm. Ed's heart was racing, but he decided to obey. Ed stepped away from the driver's seat, and one of the masked men took over. The 2 other gunmen turned to the children. The bus went silent except for the muffled crying of a few terrified kids. The man at the wheel steered the bus off the road into a dry canal. The once familiar landscape disappeared behind them. Inside the bus, things were getting tense. Some of the younger kids didn't fully understand what was happening. 5-year-old Monica Artery stared curiously at one of the men. The legs of the pantyhose on his head hung down like floppy rabbit ears. Are you the pantyhose on his head hung down like floppy rabbit ears? Are you the Easter Bunny?